Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Shah, and today I have CityCrusher joining us for a discussion. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, everyone. I go by the name CityCrusher on YouTube. I originally just watched YouTube for fun, and because of all the misandry going on, I became an MRA. And sadly enough, the typical MRA is no good at what they do. So I'm trying to spread the message to get out there, and try and encourage activism because we really need activism. If you look at some of the videos I have, what we're covering, it is brutal. The feminists have been working to harm men since the dawn of their movement. First of all, we got to know this: feminism is a hate movement. It's never been about equality. Uh, People don't want to hear that, but it's a hate movement against men. And they will actually sacrifice the odd woman to get at men. That's their main goal, to harm men, period.
So I'll tell you
Okay.
this. Um, what I've been watching your videos, and I couldn't help but like binge your videos for a while. And I think what's most interesting to me is I just think you do such a good job of just honing into I pronounce it misandry. Maybe that's how it's actually said. But I feel like you do such a good job of just zeroing into it when you see it that it's very entertaining for someone like me who's
Okay.
watching.
Can I mention this to you,
Yeah.
Shah? The heart and mind of the pro male collective is Mr. Pink and Yellow. You can find him. He has a YouTube channel. And the thing is, he's the one who really started the pro male collective movement. And because my channel's the biggest right now, people sometimes mistake that I'm a single person. I'm not. I'm part of a group.
Hmm.
And almost all the things you were talking about, all the times I zeroed in, was taking his framing.
Hmm.
The most important thing he's ever done is said, this is how you frame the issue, right? For example, he said, he was one video where he's talking about the myth of male power. And he said, it's not a myth, it's a lie. And that's a very important distinction, right? For example, um, there are terms such as simp, cock, shit test, etc., that are misframing. For example, a shit test is not a test, it's just abuse. So if guys try to call it a shit test, they're trying to say there's something okay with this. Women aren't being abusive. What they're doing is they're simply testing us to see if we're worthy of them. Is it no? It is abuse. It is dominance. It's actually sadism,
You know,
and that's how you have to frame this.
that's interesting. I like that you brought up this question of framing. And I'm hoping to get deeper into that. It's interesting because when I think of something like a shit test, I guess that's a basic concept you can say as far as like red pill or manosphere
Yeah.
goes. Um, on the one hand, it does have a sort of utility value for people who are learning about that and saying, okay, I can recognize a shit test, I can spot a shit test, and I can ultimately come up with a strategy to deal with it. But if we move that out of frame, what you're saying is not incorrect. Yes, it is a kind of abuse. It's just that what's happened is that the men's space has figured out how to cope with the abuse in a way that allows them to get a better utility value. So it's like if I pass the poo test or whatever, and this is supposed to increase attraction. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a way of accommodating female hypergamy, or maybe even at root, it is still kind of gynocentric if you frame it from kind of the angle you're coming from. So it's saying, how do I put up with abuse in a way that gets me an outcome that maybe is a little bit more desirable for me? Would that be fair?
You, you could frame it that way,
Mhm.
but there's no better outcome to abuse. You either accept abuse or you don't. It's not love, because what guys want from women is validation. They want intimacy. They want love. Abuse doesn't is none of those.
It,
So I mean, that's just a hardcore fact of that.
yeah, yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and I can definitely
Well, these
see
women aren't testing us.
it's
If when they're
just
abusive, they're just being abusive.
yeah.
They're exercising dominance,
Hmm.
and causing drama because they're bored, right?
Well,
The man
yeah.
wants peace, the woman wants drama. You know,
That's what it seems like. So it's still a I guess you can say there's still a kind of pedestalization there if it's come in from that way. I'm trying to think of what the standard responses are for a shit test that they've talked about in the space. Because I used to follow the Red Pill subreddit years ago. And I remember they had like agree and amplify was one. So it would just be take what they said and kind of turn it up to 1,000. So, oh, do you do this with all the girls? Yeah, you're number 1,001. Congratulations. Or there'd be ignoring it or deflecting it, or there'd be the pressure flip. You know what I mean? Or something like, is that what you tell? Whatever it happens to be. So they came up with these slick strategies in order to put up with abuse where most normal guys are just like trying to logically and literally argue back with it. And then it ends up, even if they win the argument, it ends up kind of just destroying things between them because the woman is coming from this position of entitlement and the man is trying to rationally, I guess, negotiate with her. And then it just, I
well,
used
he
to have this
can't
trainer.
negotiate though. He
I,
can't negotiate because he doesn't have leverage.
yeah, exactly.
The woman, she's earned her entitlement because she can do without the man. The man feels he can't do without the woman. And so there's no leverage, there's no equality, there can't be.
Yeah, it's funny.
That's
I
it.
used to have a, child support trainer, and he used to tell me because we'd be on the phone with angry folks all day. We can call them men and fathers. We used to call them non-custodial parents to kind of sterilize the situation, but they would be angry about the situation, and my trainer would tell me you can be right or you can get what you want. So they would come up with whatever their grievances were, and of course we had our fundamental beliefs in the agency about what was right and what wasn't based off of the laws, and we can discuss the laws later. Um, or what he would kind of, because the goal was to get the money, was to get them to pay the money. So the trainer would basically say, kind of work with them in a way to where you're not directly confronting them, but then you get what you want, which was the child support payment. And it's funny because when I think of something like a shit test in a way, it's it's not about being right. It's trying to get what you want. But you're right. It's coming from a position of less leverage, and it still does qualify as abuse. And I think what you have is a subset of men who have gotten so good at dealing with the abuse that they've maybe have forgotten that it is abuse in the first place and coming from this position of entitlement. Though, if I had to, try to play devil's advocate, I guess what they're going to say as well, since you don't have the leverage, what they might say is, well, what's the use complaining about it, or what's the use even mentioning it? If this works, then just do it. So, can you kind of respond to that? I guess retort if someone said that to you.
It kind of works. You mean like they managed to smooth past this particular argument?
Bed the women basically is if they can get something out of it. So I guess most men are sitting there willing to put up with this and find a way through it in order to engage in relations with the woman. And they'll say, and somehow, probably even masculinity and what a man's supposed to do will get tied into this and say, well, you just need to get better at dealing with the abuse, essentially, if I'm going to
Yeah.
take your word for it.
Well,
What?
here's another thing too. Like the biggest problem with this, like guys dealing with relationships.
Mhm.
Just recently, I did a video where feminists in Britain are trying to teach preschooler boys about toxic masculinity. They're
Mhm.
trying to brainwash little boys, and getting in a relationship with a woman will not rescue those kids. They're the next generation that's going to grow up with damaged brains. It's going to destroy their self-esteem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and this is how bad it is. Not only is it going to destroy their self-esteem, these young guys, when they grow up, are still going to be expected to withhold the or uphold the infrastructure of society. They are going to be expected to take care of things, even when their brains have been damaged.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think a recurring theme here is that so many, I guess, quote unquote solutions that are presented for men in the space, um, might even be classified as just coping with this sort of uneven situation between men
Yeah.
and women. And it's all about, it's not really about trying to, I guess, lobby for men or get things changed on a fundamental level. It's more about coping with gynocentrism and in a way playing into it, leaning into it, and bolstering gynocentrism. If
Oh,
women
here's
have
another thing.
standards, yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about gynocentrism. Mr. Pink and Yellow also said, "Oh, that's a poor term." I said, "Really? Why?" Because I was always all right with it.
Hmm.
He says, "Well, it doesn't explain anything." I'll have to ask him about it again because
That would be
personally,
interesting
I
to
said
hear.
personally I'm fine with it. It seemed like an all right term.
Yeah.
But he has a better brain for spotting the weaknesses and
Uh huh.
things. No, I'm sorry about getting off topic
No, no
with the
worries. Go
kid.
wherever you'd like.
Because,
We're having fun, so.
okay, because I also want to talk about why we have in the pro male collective rejected the word cock because there's no point in calling men cocks
Mhm.
since we have no ability to stop a woman from sleeping around. It's not illegal. We have no legal recourse. And of course, what the old days, the guys would like threaten her physically. You're not allowed to do that anymore. There's absolutely nothing you or I or any other guy can do to stop a woman in our relationship with us from sleeping around. So there's no point me calling you a cock if you have a girlfriend who's sleeping around on you.
Well, I'll say this. That's an interesting way to look at it. I'm definitely and looking forward to hearing more about the Pro Male Collective. Like this is, I think your guys' group is very fascinating. When it comes to now, you can't stop them from doing what they're gonna do, and that's why people like red pillars in the space will say something like it's she's not yours, it's just your turn or whatever. That's a maxim that's thrown about out there. I think what they would say is that, well, your only power in the situation is to walk away. Now, that's true if you're not really entangled with her so much, like if this is just a girlfriend or something. But if you're married or you're trying to get into any kind of long term, higher leveraged investment like family creation, you can still walk away, but it's going to be very painful if you're operating under the norms of, you know, let's say traditional conservative culture, not even traditional conservative, but also everybody expects the man to be the provider. Even if they're feminists, they expect the man to do that. So if you're
Especially especially since they're feminist. Feminists are 100% for gender roles for men. They
yeah,
demand,
they
right?
definitely
They're
do.
not about equality. A hate movement can never be about the truth. They always tell lies.
Yeah, so I mean, in a way, it's kind of funny because I feel like the using the word cuck will go two ways. Either you can't use it or you it's almost like you can't use it because everybody just qualifies under the term in one way or
Well,
another.
that just well, let's put it this way. If you say walk away, if you
Yeah.
walk away, one of two things are going to happen.
Hmm.
You get together with another woman, which again you have no power,
Hmm.
or you avoid dating in relationships. And what man wants to actually do that,
Yeah.
right? Like even the MGTOW guys end up getting girlfriends, you know.
On a long enough
Mm.
timeline, yeah, I mean, I think that's a very hard thing for men to avoid. Maybe some black pillars will disagree with me, but on a long enough timeline, one way or another, men, I guess, try to figure out what level of risk they're willing to take with women and what level of commitment. And every single action probably requires some form of payment or another in some
Yeah.
way or form. The question is how much are you willing to leverage in any given situation? And how good can you be at sort of tap dancing your way and avoiding a landmine, so to
Yeah.
speak?
Another
Yeah.
one is simp.
Mhm.
Uh, Once in a while we will use simp, but we try and avoid it because all that's happening when you call someone a simp, you're basically saying you're pandering in the wrong way,
Yeah.
or you're increasing the amount you have to bribe. But all men have to pander.
Yeah.
If you want a woman in your life, you have to pander. So in that regard, we're all simps. It's just a matter of degree.
This reminds me of a couple different bigger content creators. So Coach Greg Adams, I like his stuff. He's pretty entertaining and funny, and he has something called All Men Pay, and he advocates for different stuff, but you know, what he calls going to the junior college, and he just pays up front, and he's just like, all men have to pay anyways, and you're gonna have to pay way more on the back end. And it also reminds me of a It's Complicated channel. He has an episode called Forced to Simp, and it seems like what you're saying is kind of in a similar reasoning where one way or another, because you know, a lot of what people say was, "Well, stop simping, don't simp." He will say you're kind of forced to simp, and the manosphere sort of encourages you to become the alpha simp. So, you know, sometimes they'll say it's not tricking if you got it. If you become the high value man and you can afford all these things, and you know, reach up to the level of delusional hypergamy from the other side, then you've won the game. But what he will say is you've kind of just become an alpha simp at this point. Like you've just become the simpiest of the simps because you're still catering to their side. It's a it's a tough thing because you know I don't know, I look at this and I look at some of the guys in the space and I think, you know, how much of this is correct or not correct. You know, a lot of it they say relies on evo psych, and they want to say it's natural and that men and women should be in this position, and women are born with their value, men have to create their value. That's another one that they throw out there. Well, what's your opinion on that? Just that maxim that swirls around the space, and everybody says it like gospel. Women are born with their value, men have to create their value. Is that true or not
Well,
true?
to be more precise,
Mm.
men want women and women don't want men.
Mhm.
I mean, they don't actually have more value than men. Without men, the world would collapse.
Mhm.
We have no society. We have nothing. We have laws. There's nothing.
Yeah,
Men
infrastructure
are
would not be
Yeah,
maintained.
exactly.
Yeah.
Even the great philosophy of the world is male made.
Mhm.
You know, our sense of justice is male made. You know, they say women civilize men, but it's the other way around. I remember Mr. Pink and Yellow saying, you know, without men, women would just be chimps screeching and shitting in their hands. He was very extreme about it when he said it. But without men, we have nothing. So men have value. It's just that men value women. That's not the same as the women having value. It's just that you wanting something might make it value. You could want like a rookie card,
Mhm.
baseball card. It's just a card. It doesn't have any intrinsic value itself. But
But
you might pay $1,000 because you have this, you know,
a
brand new
nostalgia or
original rookie
something.
card. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's interesting. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do is sort of circumambulate around what it is that makes your perspective different from the stuff we've seen in the sphere. Because I really feel like you're coming, and maybe Mr. Pink and Yellow have, there's something unique about you guys. You seem to kind of pop up out of nowhere. And this pro male collective, I was actually following you guys on Reddit, and then one day I just stopped seeing the threads on there. So
yeah, they took it down. They took down. They're doing their work now on my personal Reddit. I have a personal CityCrusher Reddit,
okay, I'll
but
have to find that.
it was doing so much better as the Pro Male Collective. But
Yeah.
we have stalkers, and they reported it off Reddit.
Sounds
So
like you
yeah,
guys are on the front lines. Well, I'll say this. When I hear pro male collective, that word collective jumps out at me because oftentimes, especially in the sort of prevailing manosphere, most of the, I guess you can say, solutions are centered around individual. It's more of a focus on individuals and men's individuals' lives and screw everybody else. You know, what can I do for me
yeah.
right now? How
There's no solutions there because take for example, I also did a video long ago about the South Korean men.
Mhm.
They formed a proper MRA, and they actually did real pushback
Mhm.
against the feminists there because they worked together, and they actually went to a male politician who was willing to listen to them and say, "Look, we'll support you. You take care of us and our issues." And he
Mhm.
did.
W-
And that's what we need here. And you see, collectively, without a collective, you can't do anything. Men, for example, will form unions. If it was all individuals, why do men form unions?
What do you think is the number one, well, number one or couple things that is stopping men from collectively coming together to be able to form a type of collective that can actually lobby and make any meaningful change and push back on the sort of feminist stranglehold on the system? Like, and that might be a gigantic question, but is there anything you see that jumps
Oh,
out
it's
at
not
you?
gigantic, actually. It's a very simple answer. Men really don't like men. We're truly human as little boys. Little boys have solidarity with one another. If you uh, attack an 8-year-old boy and say, you're scum because you're a little boy, other little boys will support him. They'll say, hey, you can't say that to him because I'm a little boy too. So you're jabbing me. Once you hit puberty, we're subhumans because guys are willing to do whatever it takes to pander to the opposite sex.
Yeah.
I mean, male friendships tend to die off with age. I mean, that's what it is. A lot of guys say, I have no friends. Look, dudes, how many times have you met an old male friend and you say, oh, we got to get together sometime? You never do because you're not really interested in being with one another.
It
You
certainly
know?
becomes tougher. Like when I think of my friends, they're typically, a lot of my close friends are people I've known probably from childhood. When when I look at it, like my closest friends,
Yeah.
it's certainly rare, or it's tougher. I don't know. I know I hear people complaining about that it's harder to make friends nowadays, and I don't know if it's because of the times or because that's just how it is when you get older, but it certainly does seem that way. So, I mean, yeah, what I like most about your channel is that it's so men's rights focused. And I tend to gravitate towards men's rights, even though I have spent plenty of time, reading and learning about the other parts of the manosphere because I used to work at child support. So it was just so in front of my face, like the legal aspects of all this. And I just kept looking at the sort of deal that men are expected to enter into, or at least pressured to enter into when it comes to women and family and marriage and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I look at men's rights and I have a certain soft spot for that. Um, I guess if I had to try to play devil's advocate, so many men may even be frustrated or at least a little disappointed in men's rights because they feel like maybe there hasn't been any meaningful or effective change. Which, I mean, there's stuff here or there. Sometimes men will get together,
Oh,
Kentucky, I
here's another
believe.
thing.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about. The second issue is that men know if they really stick up for themselves as men,
Mhm.
they're going to get deselected.
From
It's
the
that's
mating
simple.
market.
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, if you're already married, and the wife finds out, they are your enemy. Without any exaggeration, there's going to be hell to pay. And you might find yourself either divorced or ostracized from the family circle. People don't talk to you. There are real consequences for men to stand up for themselves as men. So you're talking about a real forcible change in psychology or a fight against your own psychology because there are real consequences. Like, for example, Mr. Pink and Yellow,
Uh-huh.
he's in the British Isles. He is smart never to show his face because that's a feminist hellhole
I
there.
I
Now,
certainly joke, and when I joke, I mean it's just being half serious, actually serious about it. Is what I'll say is like if you're a men's rights guy, you may as well just accept that you're like a male witch. Like as soon as people find out, they're like, he's a witch, and that's unfortunately the stigma. When it comes to like, I guess you can say, see, that's the thing too, and I agree with you there, and I think that's probably why a lot of people will gravitate towards the sort of pickup artist side of the manosphere, the sort of self improvement side, because it's more like, and even back then too on the Reddit, like it was a kind of first rule of Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club, and it was you were never the promise, I guess, back then is that you have this little, I guess, red book of techniques or strategies you can use to try to, I don't know, maximize your what you get out of life or your enjoyment in a feminist sort of gynocracy. You know what I mean? So if I learn all the attraction measures here and I can figure out how to pass the shit test and all this stuff, I am going to get maybe more receptivity from women, whether they're feminists or not. I mean, some might say all of them are to some degree. And that was supposed to be enough. But at the same time, they also had maxims like enjoy the decline, welcome to clown world. So there's this kind of resigned acceptance that the world is destroyed. It's kind of like a rotting carcass that you're just trying to pick off of
I really have
something.
distaste for clown world as well, because you know the Jewish people that were suffering under the Nazis,
Hmm.
they didn't say, "Oh, this is clown world." You know, the Nazis are clowns. No, they recognize the danger they are, and feminists are actually a danger to men. Period.
Yeah.
There's nothing clownish about this. This is just you might find it strange that the opposite sex has this completely unwarranted uh, contempt and disgust and even hatred towards men
Mm.
who worship what men worship women. That's why misogyny, we reject that. Just misogyny effectively doesn't exist. You'd probably have to find a 1 in a million guy who just innately dislikes women or hates women.
Yeah.
The vast majority of us worship women. Misandry is 100% real. You see it everywhere. You know?
Yeah,
So
and again, that's why I really like your channel, because you do such a good job of just zeroing in on it even when it's subtle. So sometimes there's things and it's just like, "Oh, that's
well, I've
actually
been
a really
taught by the
good point."
best. I've
Yeah.
been taught by the best.
Shout out to your coach there, Mr. Pink and Yellow. Also what you were mentioning prior there about, the Jews living under Nazi regime, it reminds me, it's complicated as a similar question, or at least a retort, about slavery in the United States, and he has a disdain for the phrase "it is what it is." So are we all just supposed to accept this, even though we know it's inherently wrong? And I certainly look at it, and I hope, and I see what you're doing. There's a kind of it. I feel like you have to have a little bit of positivity about the future, or at least believe it can be changed, to want
Yes,
to.
exactly. That's why we're also not black pillars.
Yes, that's what I'm driving at. That's what I'm driving
Yeah.
at. Um, because yeah, the black pillars, and sometimes even red pillars to some extent, seem like they're pretty black pilled in some of their views. But I believe men's rights still kind of has this hope there, or at least
Yeah.
some view that, hey, it's possible to push back on this. And
One of the PMC guys, Eric Schiedler,
mm,
he and I talk all the time. He told me, he said, it's going to be this generation that's going to make the effect, not us old guys, because you
mm,
see it in Gen Z now. It is going to change because we've got, what are we? You evolve under pressure, and now we're getting a new pressure. There's going to be positive change. Trust me.
yeah, I think so too. I mean, that's I guess the question is like, is there less simping? Is there more simping? And there's this kind of argument of forced to simp, but at the same time, it's like people do react, and I mean, to some level, lot of the manosphere does represent a reaction or an adaptation of behavior patterns to what we've been dealing with as far as changes from the other side and changes in society. And I think where you can see this a lot is marriage, and men, opting to stay away from, especially the state contract of the marriage license, or not wanting to do that, much to the chagrin of many groups, whether it be women themselves or trad cons. I'm interested to hear your views on maybe tr how you kind of view feminists or traditional conservatives, and what is it you
This is
think they're
something,
missing?
again, one of the guys said from the P Pro Male Collective. The trad cons are that's traditional conservatives for anyone
Mhm,
who doesn't know. They are just the opposite side of the same coin of feminist.
mhm.
There's feminists on one side, trad cons on the other, because they are just as hostile to men's well-being. Both they and the feminists want men in these defunct, harmful gender roles, these servant gender roles. The servant gender roles that, as you say, with child support, no matter how much well you serve, you can be tossed aside at any time and enslaved, because child support is enslavement, period. That's not exaggeration.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
enslavement.
it's a forced wealth transference by the state, and your labors are the fruits of your labors are I mean, sometimes even for a child that's not biologically yours,
Yeah.
that can
Well,
happen.
even if it was biologically yours, it's still enslavement. It's still wrong. You're being estranged from that child,
Hmm.
and you're being forced to pay, and it's out of sadism again. Because there's no receipts. The mother doesn't have to prove what she's spent money on the child.
No, yeah.
But even so, it's like, okay, if you're allowed, women are allowed to abort their children in a lot of states. Men should be able to walk away. The man isn't necessarily harming the child by walking away because, hey, the child's still alive. He's still supposedly under the care of his loving mother, right? Right. So, but abortion, they just wanted to destroy the child, you know.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. So it's a lump of cells when it comes to abortion, but that same lump of cells is now a person once they want to make a man pay child support.
Y-
So you have to understand that the double standards are there. The children aren't even human to these people. The children are objects to be used to enforce men to suffer,
Well,
pay and suffer.
as soon as the child becomes 18, at that and the child support's done and all that, then all of a sudden it's, well, go talk to your father. And then suddenly it changes, and there's even a little bit of a boot and a kind of nudge to say, well, go ask your father for some money or go do this. He hasn't done anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And then suddenly when they can't really be used as a
yeah.
tool or a chess piece anymore, then it starts to,
Let me show you, by the way, here's a good example of how trad cons and feminists are the same way.
mm,
They were, I forget which state it was, but they were working for shared parenting,
mhm.
and the feminists came in and with the help of the trad cons, blocked that bill. They said, sorry, we want child support. We want men being estranged from the family and child support. They stopped the equality of shared parenting.
Well, it's really
That shows.
odd too because I mean, okay, if you want to make the argument that there's the tender years and then from age 0 to 7 or 9 or whatever it is, um, the child should be with the mom, but then they don't really come in on the other side of that and say, okay, the kid's 11 now, let's go ahead and put him with dad, till they're 18. It's just it'll just still the children will still stay with the mom. Um, Okay, yeah, so that's interesting there. And what do you mentioned earlier that we have to because, basically abandon these gender roles. And I guess you could say reject the type of masculinity that's sort of sold or discussed with men from the prevailing cultural narratives, whether it be feminism or tradcons. But what do you say to the religious people who maybe aren't, because what'll happen is people from tradcon side will look at not even just red pillars, but anybody advocating for that and saying, you guys are just feminists. You're just the male version of a feminist or whatever the hell it happens to be. And they're basically not willing to abandon the gender roles because maybe they feel like it's foundational to their value system or their religion. How
Well,
can you convince?
their
How,
value system is woman worship. So of course they can't abandon those roles. Those roles are pandering.
how,
Women demand we have
hmm.
to give these roles.
How would
They
you
demand these roles.
how would you make the pitch to them to convince them that, hey, there is such a thing as abandoning how we see these roles today that's not incongruent maybe with natural law or your religious belief or whatever it happens to be. Like, do you think that's even an argument worth trying to make to them, or not
Well,
really?
religious people, they're gynocentric, as you say, as well.
Hmm.
They abandon all kinds of rules that force, like women obey your husbands. They abandon that all the time.
Yeah.
Religious people don't follow their religion.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, there's certainly a case to be made for that. And I've heard from, it's I I think there's a lot of focus on Christianity only because it is the prevailing religion here and has had some impact, you can say, on culture and all that
Here's
stuff.
another thing:
Yeah,
circumcision was not a Gentile exercise. The Gentiles adopted it because they wanted to stop masturbation. They didn't like the idea of boys masturbating.
really. I've never
Exactly.
looked too deeply into that. I've always heard it was for like health reasons or to stop infect. I have
No,
no
that
idea.
No,
But
no, that was the original. They even came out and said it back then. They wanted to discourage boys from masturbating. They didn't care if girls masturbated.
yeah,
That wasn't even on their mind. It's just boys because male sexuality is hated. Men are hated, and therefore male sexuality is hated.
that's definitely
And
true.
so, and
If you
so
if you
the
see a
reason
guy
they did that,
winning, yeah,
yeah, then of course that's why afterwards they just say, "Oh, we're doing this for religious
yeah.
purposes," right? Which is a falsehood. They either don't know their own history or they're just outright lying.
Yeah, so you can say a lot of it is a I don't know if misinterpretation would be the word, but there's definitely some cherry picking going on as far as the religious side of things go. Yeah, I mean, it seemed like there was a resurgence of or at least like when I look at the manosphere, it seems like there was a period of men sort of I guess abandoning those roles to some extent. More recently, I think there's been a sort of successful takeover of the manosphere by tradcons. Tradcons kind of came in around the
Yes.
last election, and the red pillars especially kind of bent the knee to tradcons in a way,
Well, they
you could
didn't
say.
gatekeep, right? Because they didn't want to turn around and say and actually define their group because then they could be held accountable. You
Yeah,
could say, okay, this is your definition. Do you fit that definition? So that's why, like, MGTOW even argued for married men to be MGTOW, which was just in complete opposite. You just couldn't do it.
yeah,
But the other thing is, like, the pro male collective said, look, we're anti-racist and we're anti-homophobic.
mhm.
We made those rules. And the thing is, if you're a red pillar, there's nothing to say. Like alt-righter, the alt-right can be red pill, right? So I mean, what it is we have to be as men prevent guilt by association.
Yeah,
That's why we have to gatekeep. We have to say, sorry, this is the kind of person who is an MRA.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
I could see that. I mean, I think MRAs need to become a lot more staunch in that way, because some of the issue like, I try not to get bogged down, like, when it comes to men's issues, it seems like it's pretty susceptible to by getting hijacked from one sort of thing or another, whether it's religious folks hijacking it, or whatever it happens to be, because in some ways, I think tradcons are looking at it like, "Oh my gosh, these guys are advocating for a type of secularism, and if we allow gender roles to be abandoned by men, then that's it." You know what I mean? And it's funny to me because I feel like what they're holding on to isn't even a real traditionalism. Like they're selling a traditionalism or wanting to go back to some golden age, Halcyon era. And I know that they can't make good on that and that it's mostly cosplaying to something that's not real, that's
yeah.
not really would fit in, with our reality for how life works and with the technology that we have and all that. I think they might look from the other saying that they'll ask, what's your solution? How's it going to be better? Why should we? They just feel very threatened by this. And maybe they feel like they're giving up something to secularism instead of just pushing back on gynocentrism.
Yeah, well, if you're talking about the religious
Mhm.
again, I mean, it's neither here nor there. Whether you're secular or religious, man, you still have to deal with the problems that all guys deal with.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that keep our channel small too isn't just the nerfing, but men's issues are actually too broad.
Mhm.
Because I find if you're a channel that grows really well, a lot of it is because you're fairly niche. Like you can say, my channel is strictly about, I don't know, anime. There's even guys
Yeah.
who got specific animes that they zero in on, and people will go in and watch that particular show.
Yeah.
Because I know I do it. I go to channels because I know this particular channel I watch will be about this
Mhm.
topic. But the men's topics are just too broad. Includes
Yeah.
misinjury everywhere,
Yeah,
right?
I could see that, and it seems like a lot of the channels that get big, they're maybe even selling something specific or they are, that's where probably the self-improvement stuff does well because they focus in on that or they focus in on getting your dream girl or
Perfect
whatever it
example.
happens to be.
The channel, it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's much bigger than mine because he's got a focus. His focus is on dating and relationships
Hmm.
specifically.
Yeah.
And so he's a great channel. I know if I can go to his channel, I said, I know I'm going to get. You don't know what I'm going to get with my channel because it includes anywhere from guys being fired from canceled from a Hollywood gig to men being forced to pay child support or a man being murdered by a woman and being let go. I mean, it's everywhere.
That
So
that's right. Like if I had to put your channel into a category, I would just say it's anti-misandry. And anywhere you see misandry, someone puts out the bat signal and CityCrusher gets on it, you know. One thing you mentioned to me prior is that, you know, the pro male collective rejects all the pills. I hope I'm not misquoting that. And I wanted to explore that a little bit more, if
okay,
you're willing.
first the red pill
Mhm.
we reject simply because uh, well, even the black pill, especially the black pill, I'll pick on them first because they are anti-activism.
Mhm.
Their their idea is that the world is over, let it burn. The world's not actually going to burn though. That's where they get it wrong. It's very solipsistic, right? They're saying, I can't get the girl and the world's going to die. I said, no, you can't get the girl and you can't get the girl. The world's going to continue on without you. So that's the simple fact of it. Like 1984, that the novel. I mean, if it's the boot being stomped on the face perpetually, it was such a nightmare because Orwell was saying this could continue on perpetually, forever.
Yeah,
You
I
know, the
see what you
abuse.
mean.
So,
Yeah,
so
I'll definitely say with
yeah.
black pillars, I've never gravitated towards that way. I mean, you know, they definitely seem like they're depressed, and not that it's just I don't know what it is. Black pillars just seemed a little bit too out there for me, or that they've just given up too much, and it is very depressing. It's just like a dark pit.
Well,
Um,
also they're saying their lives are over just because they're deselected. Like
yeah,
they're saying to be male is to be with a female. That's their whole life. And I
yeah,
want men's life to be much more than that. Much
yeah,
more than that.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, a lot of their I guess the way they look at their own value is based off of how they think or how women do see them. And I mean, me personally, when I look at a lot of people who are black pill, at least black pilled in the sense that they've given up on women, I do like to think that some of them can at least get better with it, you know, and maybe have
Well,
some type of
they haven't
relationship.
given up on women. What they've done is they've recognized women have given up on them. That's an important distinction, right?
Interesting.
So,
Yeah, I yeah, I've just never been able to get on board with them. Like I still believe that they can improve at least some of their dealings with women in some ways. Though you know, okay, I can understand how some guys have it really bad. It just doesn't.
also,
Yeah,
they exercise misandry in the way that they're the ones who brought up lookism.
yeah,
Now, lookism is misandry because they're not just saying women aren't involving with. They're not saying women reject us and therefore the women are bad. They say women are rejecting us for these super guys who I hate,
hmm,
right? There's this alpha Chad out there,
the
and he's to
resentment is
blame.
definitely there.
You know, it's
Yeah,
like, dude, these guys. I said, look, I have a video saying Chad doesn't exist. There are guys who are tall and good looking, and maybe they'll get a one night stand. But if they want a long term relationship, they have to pander.
yeah,
And
certainly.
they're still not respected as men either. They're not respected as men any more than the ugly guys.
I remember you saying that it's not looks, but it's status. And that might have been the video that you're referencing, but I think you kind of class status as the most important measure there
Yeah. Well, let's
for
put it this
men.
way. Aerosmith, the lead singer of Aerosmith, what's his name? Can you remember his name?
I don't.
Anyway, the lead singer, Tyler. Tyler's lead singer. His daughter, she's the actress. Can you remember Liv Tyler? Liv Tyler is a lot better looking woman
Mhm.
than Tyler himself is a man because he gained enough status that he was banging all these beautiful women, and he produced a better looking woman because his wife, her mother, is no doubt a looker,
Yeah.
right? You know, and why was it? Because he's a rock star. You think a guy that ugly would be doing that well with the opposite sex? You know, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said about status playing a large role in that. But then it sounds like you'd agree if he for long term, but long term for everybody, whether or not it's looks or not, then that's where, some type of payment comes in. Do you believe there was a time in history where that equation was more balanced? It wasn't always men having to pay without women contributing as well. Like I focus a lot on my newest, most recent obsession, at least for the past couple years, is the dowry system and how that used to work in terms of matchmaking and the matchmaking process for marriage.
On a
Um,
case like that, it's just a case where the women of the past are no different from the women of today. They don't want to work,
mhm,
right? So in the past, they wanted a man to take the hard labor.
mhm.
Whether either he was a working man who did all the hard labor, or he was
Yeah,
high status man and they didn't have to work at
the
all.
provider, so to
Yeah,
speak.
provider, exactly. So in that case, uh, because there was no clean, easy office job for a
Mhm.
woman to
Yeah,
run. Right
AC
now, a
wasn't
woman
there.
could get a part-time job and get by,
Yeah.
right? You know, a woman could get OnlyFans and really make money. But you see, back then, there was none of that. So women wanted to partner with men. It didn't mean they liked the man. It's
Mhm,
not that they wanted the man himself.
mhm.
They wanted his labor, and they were willing to pay a price for it,
Yeah, at
right?
least there was a commensurate amount that actually made the match make sense. So, typically the woman's side of this equation helped set up the household, and then the men came in and pretty much maintained and did providing and all that. So it's an elegant system and it's an interesting thing. I don't want to get too bogged down in the history. But going forward with technology, I tend to look at it as that's where I see marriage and kind of the way we do this now is so lopsided because back then there was at least this commensurate endowment that the woman would have before she
I don't
got.
see it was called commensurate. You know, the man providing while the woman leached off him, that's not commensurate.
I would say,
All
yeah,
the only difference is she didn't feel that she could just get up and leave. That's the only difference, but that doesn't mean it's commensurate.
I I would argue that it was commensurate, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of men in their families understood the provider value of the man, so they would reject women that didn't bring some kind of value, and the value was typically, I would say, pretty substantial. Like in a lot of even
Like
middle
what?
class, a house, the bride's family would provide the house, and in Greece, for instance, even
But
Cyprus.
that's just another group of men. The bride's
Well,
family is it's the men providing that.
not
The bride didn't provide anything.
not to if they were lower status, if the family was lower status, if they did not, because see, at the bottom you had a minimum sort of dowry amount, and if they couldn't afford that or the family couldn't afford it, the women would have to work. And a lot of times they would take whatever job, and at the end of the contract, they would be given the minimum dowry. Then they would be able to pair with somebody that was probably lower on the rung as well. Men that were higher up would reject a lot of offers unless it was something substantial. So typically, women would come with some piece of land that would produce income every year, and the man would have usufruct over that, which means management of the funds that come from that. So, it's definitely a sliding scale on how that works. And what I'm looking at it is, okay, the reason I'm so focused on that is because tradcons today, they typically harp on as men and men's roles and your masculinity being determined by you having to provide every single cent that goes into that marriage and household and nothing for the women. But looking back into 2,000 years of European history, give or take, a couple hundred, men would not get married to women unless they brought in this substantial amount to set up the household. And then the woman sort of had a buy-in into, okay, this man's going to do the providing and provisioning. You might say you can call that leeching at some point depending, but at the same time, it still wasn't just given freely. They didn't just throw their son into the grinder, so to speak. So I have a respect for that system.
However, the
Mhm,
son, uh, actually, they have thrown boys in the grinder at one period.
mhm.
I have a video which says it's not the boys that are valued, it is their labor.
Yeah.
And there's this guy called the historian,
Mhm.
uh, and he mentioned how there was a time where a particular place and time in history where there was famine, and so
Mhm.
they booted the boys out.
Yeah.
If they were European, they would say, "Go on and take care of yourself," and they kept the women. They couldn't feed everybody, right? So
Mhm.
they valued the boys as labor, and
Yeah.
they'd keep them around. But if they couldn't feed everybody, then the boys were gone.
Let me tell you,
So
I loved your video on Sparta. You reacted to a documentary on it was like Spartan history or something like that, and you showed like how gynocentric it really was. And I found that fascinating. I definitely did. But I think you can point to some examples of that, but I'd say by and large, as far as setting up a household went, men and women still had to contribute something substantial in order to at least get into marriage. And then, obviously the laws made, in my opinion, better sense back then because if there was a divorce, then the woman would only leave with her dowry. So a guy wouldn't continue to finance this woman's life like we do now. Then we got this concept of community property. And when two people get married, whatever they have, doesn't matter who provided it, is community property and just gets split, 50-50 down the middle. That's what they ended up doing in Italy there when they finally allowed divorce in the 70s. I think it was actually 79, the late 70s. But
well,
the
they were better people back then. It's just that
yeah.
the environment forced them to behave that way.
Yeah, well, see, that's the
So
big thing. I always say technology is like the X factor in all this. And this is where I get annoyed at tradcons who want to sell a kind of traditionalism that we know it doesn't fit
it doesn't
anywhere. And
exist now.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so what ends up happening is they're just kind of selling an aesthetic that ends up coming off as women just kind of playing this sort of wearing this costume for a bit until they get tired of wearing the costume about 7 years into the marriage, and then suddenly they're a feminist or whatever it happens to be, or the man's an abuser and he just didn't servant leader right. And then they get ground up, through the system and demonized and just you're just another one on the block, I guess. So that's the part that annoys the heck out of me. And then the question is, okay, what can men do to resist this or to affect change? And then the question comes, does it come from individuals or does it come from collective or both? A lot of the manosphere seems to be pretty pessimistic, maybe even black pilled on men working together. I hear so many creators say that men are never going to come together and
The
collectively.
thing is, they don't want to themselves.
Yeah.
That's why they speak so highly about the individual, because they're basically saying, if I join a collective,
Mhm.
I'll have to work or I have to put myself out there. Think
Yeah.
about it this way: militaries are one giant collective. So
Yeah.
men are fine with men join the military all the time, whether it's Navy, Air Force, Marines. They join it and they join it willingly and they take orders because they attack other men, kill them, take their stuff, come back and bribe their women to stay around.
Yeah. They get some
That's
war
how
booty.
war works,
Yeah.
right? So the reason they don't want to do it this collective is because the woman is not going to be there at the end. If you fight as a man for your rights, you're going to be deselected. They're not going to be there at the end.
Well, okay, so I think we've talked about the black pill a bit. And then the next one I think on the line, I know you said you guys reject all the pills, is the red pill. So what would you say the pro male collective's view on the red pill is, or what the red pill
Yeah.
does wrong? Or maybe we can kind of, maybe I don't know if you guys do you see
Again,
them
like the
doing
red
anything
pillars.
right, or is it just everything's wrong? But I want to hear your opinion on that.
Well, again, like we were just talking about, they want to be individualistic because they don't want to work together.
Hmm.
So they're the red pillars, just like the black pillars. They're anti-activism,
Hmm.
right? They don't want to deal with that. And they also make excuses for women because when I first started watching let's say MGTOW and red pill content way back in 2013, they were all about this posturing about we're just going to understand how it works, and we'll talk about shit test and hypergamy and why. But the fact is, they just don't want to have to sacrifice any of their time and effort to change things for the better. They're actually anti-activism. And again, you can be racist and be red pill, right? And racism is actually another form of misandry. Because I have this video where there's this trans man.
Mm-hmm.
He was a woman of color originally.
Mm-hmm.
And she would talk about how she'd be stopped by the police as a woman of color, and it'd be very friendly and chatty. When
Okay.
she transitioned into a man of color, once the police started, there was all this hostility.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said something like there was problems around the home, and she called the police, and the police actually told him to get on the ground or something along that. I'd have to revisit my own video.
Yeah.
And the neighbor said, "You never call the police." Because if you think about it, when they talked about blacks being hung in the American South,
Mm-hmm.
they're always male people, aren't they? How many black women were hung up by trees by the KKK?
I mean, yeah, I certainly can't think of any right now. I mean, no, yeah, I couldn't tell you. I mean, maybe
Same
something
thing as
happened.
homophobia. Like if
Yeah.
I looked up photos, just because I want to make this point, looked up photos of gay people being hung in, let's say, Iran or Iraq. I forget which country it was,
Mm-hmm.
because it would be anti-gay.
Sure.
They were always gay men.
Yeah.
Lesbians were, you just don't have. So homophobia and racism is rooted in misandry. It's hatred of the male. It's people hate men, and so therefore they hate male sexuality.
Well,
So of course that's why
when it comes to
circumcises. Yeah.
when it comes to that conversation about the homosexuals, there's probably a lot more hate thrown at the men than there is of lesbian women. There seems to be,
But that's what I mean.
yeah.
That's why I say it's misandry. Because it's the fact that they're male above anything else.
Hmm.
I mean, after all, like women can have their vibrators, but if men talk about,
In their
like a
erotic
sex
novels.
doll,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, then they're called degenerates.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just people don't like men, therefore they don't like their sexuality. Here's another thing, and I think it's my country, the province of Quebec, the French province.
Hmm.
I think it's illegal for you to snip the ears of Dobermans. You know how they'd snip the ears so
Oh
they'd be
yeah,
straight
they
up?
make them sharp.
Yeah, now they've outlawed that. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But I bet in Quebec, yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
I bet in Quebec you're allowed to circumcise little boys. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there seems to be a contradiction there. I wonder if, you know, probably what they're going to say is that it's going to step into the parents' rights to make that decision. But still, I mean, obviously the child doesn't know what's going on, so maybe that can wait till later or something. But I don't know. Maybe they've chosen to uphold
the
parental
point
rights.
is that male rights are beneath animal rights. That's the point. That's not exaggeration.
I
That's
think there's a lot of people that agree with you on that. Okay, so as far as there's the RP, definitely there's no focus on men, and definitely like pickup artist Red Pill, which is the self-improvement gurus. There's no emphasis on the men coming together, and they'd probably admit that and say, yeah, that's true. It's just about individual self-improvement in order to try to get a life that you desire. So that's one thing. What would you say is another thing? If there's anything else that comes to the top of your mind for red pillars.
No, but I did want to tackle something else.
Sure.
You said there's male hypergamy, and
Uh-huh.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Because another one, I can't find his video, but Mr. Pink and Yellow had a video
Uh-huh.
talking about male hypergamy,
Mm-hmm.
and he listed all these rules for it. Now, here's
Interesting.
a case: men were status hoarders. For example, if you were a young woman who wanted to become a feminist,
Okay.
and you went to like the major feminist Reddit,
Mhm.
Said,
Oh,
look,
yeah, like 2X
here,
chromosomes or whatever that is.
yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. Point
Yeah.
is, if you went to the major one and you said, we're our own Reddit, there's only 4 of us. We want to join. The major Reddit would help them out. It would say,
There's a
fantastic.
solidarity. Yeah, there's a camaraderie
Yeah.
there between them.
Now, I don't think it's true anymore, but the biggest MRA Reddit,
Mhm.
they actually had a rule that if you want to join them, your Reddit would have to have at least 30,000 subs. I think they took it down because we were starting to call them out on it.
Yeah.
That is status hoarding. They say, we only want to deal with you if you built up enough status that we can absorb.
That would
Right?
be a ironic thing if it was actually people from that men's rights subreddit that contributed to the pro male collective being taken down. That's a conspiracy. What they're going to say is they're going to throw masculinity back at you. They're going to be like, well, we want to see some kind of merit first before we let you in, or you have to hit such and such bar of organization or discipline or whatever the heck it is. You got to stand 3 days outside in the cold before we let you into the Fight Club house on Paper Street or whatever the heck it
Well,
happens
the
to be.
thing is, like I said, their rule is that uh, they wanted you to have a certain amount of clout
Mm,
before they deal with you. But it was all right if they didn't gatekeep for you from being alt-right
yeah.
or homophobic or any of those other things.
Well, it's interesting.
That
It's interesting because peering over on the on the other end, where you're saying the feminists will take any of them in there, and there's this type of camaraderie. It is unfortunate. I think this kind of dovetails into a conversation of this idea of a real man, and it's like, well, all men, regardless of how masculine they are, deserve their rights, and deserve to be seen, at least through the eyes of the law, as equal, you can say, or at the very least, they deserve their certain amount of base rights, And this concept of masculinity maybe sometimes contributes to men not seeing men's base manhood at all. Sometimes some creators in the space will say there's 3 genders. There's women, and then there's high status men, and then there's everybody else, the other 80% of men, or something like
well,
that.
the masculinity is a feminist concept anyway. If you have a concept, it has to have a definite definition where you can say you are or you aren't. And
Mhm.
if once you meet that criteria, you can never be taken away. But you've had your man card taken away from you, or you can have it, which means it's not a fixed definition.
That's an
That's why it doesn't exist.
Yeah, so that's an interesting way of looking at it. That it's maybe you can say the concept of masculinity we have is kind of rooted in a kind of gynocentrism in a way. I don't know if I'm stretching that out too much, but I definitely agree with you that this concept of masculinity seems to shift, and you can even kind of see that if you look at different cultures. Like maybe in East Asia or something, the women might even to us appear more feminine, I guess you can say, but over there, they're still men, and you might even say masculine
Feminine just means appeals to men. That's all that means. So a masculine woman is just a woman who doesn't
does
appeal to
not
me.
appeal to men. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And then,
But
vice versa,
yeah,
a masculine man is something that appeals to women. Would that be fair? At least going off how people define it.
nope. Because you could go to a feminist group, the LGBT,
Hmm.
and find that they'll say the most flamboyant gay male, he's a real man
Yeah.
because he supports us.
but
You
but
know,
well, but they won't actually be attracted to that guy and sleep with them, though. They'll just kind of use it as a sort of jab at the guys, or a sort of needling. But it's not going to translate into behavior of them wanting to, actually being attracted to that guy and wanting to sleep with them. Because I mean, at
well,
some
your idea
level.
of masculinity
Mhm.
is being attractive to women.
Well, I'm just saying, if femininity, anything that's feminine is what is attractive to men. I'm
Well,
exploring this
that's what
idea.
I say when they say
Uh,
feminine. That's
oh,
what they
okay.
really mean.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's
Exactly.
the same. Now I know what you're using this example. Um, Okay, so you're saying outspoken, though women wouldn't say that. But maybe they're still going to be attracted to whatever is masculine, I guess. I don't know. I'm
Okay,
just
have you
trying to
ever
play with
heard
that.
of Karen Strawn
I
from
have,
Honey
yeah,
Badger?
I have.
Okay, Karen Strawn is not particularly feminine,
Hmm.
yet guys would still be with her,
Yeah,
right? Because she comes off as friendly towards them. So when guys say feminine woman, what they usually mean is she's non-hostile to me,
yeah,
or at least she appears
yeah, or
non-hostile.
appears submissive, as or whatever, like is
Well,
on the
I
guy's
don't say
program.
submissive. I mean non-hostile. That's what they mean when they say submissive, right?
Hmm.
A woman who doesn't do what you tell them to do, but nevertheless likes you and
Hmm.
shows you respect, you would still say she's a feminine woman. I like her. I want her around, right?
Yeah, I know you brought up male hypergamy, and that's something that I believe exists. So I agree with you. I mean, red pillars. So much of the manosphere hinges and revolves around this kind of sacred cow of female hypergamy. And they don't even say female hypergamy. They'll just say hypergamy, and it only specifically applies to women, and that men aren't like this. But
Yeah.
I think that's not true. I think men are hypergamous, and historically speaking, there's proof of that, um, of men choosing women that come from different statuses, whether it's status families or whatever it happens to be.
Well,
They weren't willing to go down.
our hypergamy is for status as opposed to women themselves. Definitely, there's more
Mm.
status to grabbing a high status woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? But men will take a low status woman, right?
They
The
will.
status they look for is
Mm.
amongst each other. For example, if if I'm a nobody and I join, let's say, a celebrity's Discord
Mhm.
server, the celebrity probably has nothing to do with me. He'll probably never talk to me,
Sure.
and I might have to pay him to join his Discord,
Yeah, and
and
it's
I
gonna
get the
be some
privilege of
guy from
talking
a
to.
different country managing it, and you're not
Yeah,
really talking to him.
exactly, exactly. So those are the dynamics of male hypergamy. It's just that the hypergamy seems to be happening amongst ourselves. Now, let me
Mm.
back up what you said though. Someone pointed out. Do you remember the old film Revenge of the Nerds?
Yeah, I used to love that film.
Yeah. Okay. Now he pointed out correctly that there's male hypergamy because there was the scene where they have the big homely girls coming over and party with them. They actually
Uh-huh.
had sex with them. You remember that?
Gosh, it's been a while since I've seen it. I just remember that guy running with the little javelin, and
Oh, sorry,
they
you're breaking up.
engineered it. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but just
Oh,
you're starting to.
oh, sorry.
Oh,
No,
there. Okay.
the scene that
Go
comes
ahead.
to mind is where they had that javelin competition, and it was
Yeah.
like them
Yeah.
against the chads, if you want to use that
Yeah.
word, and they had to
The jock.
engineer their
Is what they call
javelin,
it.
the jocks, yeah,
Yeah.
to like have this little wobbly effect, and then so when the nerd runs with it, it just looks really ridiculous, but it ended up flying
Oh yeah.
further.
But his
Yeah,
point was that they already got laid by
yeah,
these women of lower caliber because they're
yeah.
homelier. But in the end, they ended up getting with the cheerleaders because the cheerleaders had status as women.
Hmm.
Being a cheerleader is a status symbol.
Sure. I mean, you could say there's a sexual appeal to it, or the hottest women typically became the cheerleaders, and it gives them
Yeah.
some kind of maybe more desirability because of that.
What I mean is they weren't just out to get laid. They want to get laid by the very
By the
top
hot chicks,
women.
yeah, like
Yeah, exactly.
the
So that shows there is a status desire in that regard, right?
yeah, yeah,
But their status was just being a cheerleader. Like you could still have a cheerleader who isn't the best looking, but just to say she's a cheerleader kind of was a mark of status.
I think one of the biggest issues is that there isn't a delineation between like short-term engagements and long-term commitments. And a lot of this stuff, maybe when they talk about it from a sexual level, men behave that way for short-term engagements, but when it comes to long-term commitment, not so much, or they don't want to as much. Maybe more recently because of romantic love and the gaslighting from that. But historically speaking, when it came to longer term commitments, men wouldn't pull the trigger on that as much unless women came with other things. But nowadays they're just like, well, the football player is going to marry the Starbucks, the barista at Starbucks or something like that. And I think that there was a higher likelihood of that more recently because of the popularity, I would say, of romantic love. And, maybe during at-fault divorce times, at least there was some protection against hypergamy. But now more recently, men, will obviously sleep with the hotter woman, as hot as woman as they can. Then it starts to get a little bit more questionable when it comes time to sign the marriage contract and all this kind of thing. And then that's where women start to complain, because on the front end they can get all that attention. On the back end, they start having, at least nowadays, I think as more of this stuff becomes popular, men are a little bit more reticent because they've seen what happened to their fathers and
Oh,
uncles.
here's another reason that men really have to deal with activism to make positive change. Because one of the recent videos I made, we're talking about marriage. If you're from Canada, I don't know if it's here in the same with you in the States, but there's common law marriage. You've heard of that, right?
Yeah, we have common law marriage in about like 5 to 7 states out of the 50. So it's less than it used to be, but there are some.
So that's a case where you as a man didn't sign any contract, but the government just comes in and says, well, we're telling you you're in a contract.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they're like, you guys were cohabitating? Oh, that's a marriage, basically. Yeah, and I mean, and then at that point, it comes in with who you chose to cohabitate with, because a lot of the situation is going to be that the man is the provider, and they led with the money, and they're going that way in order to get the attention. Then they get the rotten end of the stick there, especially, at least financially speaking, in that way. Common law is something that, a lot of people here do think about if you're in those states. So luckily though, is that in all provinces of Canada that they have common law?
I believe it's, I believe it's, I might have to look up to see if that's the case, but I'm pretty sure it's, well, our country is a little more uniform, like, because the states are more broken up into states.
Yeah.
And even though we have provinces, there tends to be more unified under the government. We're a smaller population anyway, even though we're a bigger country. But there's just more of an umbrella with the federal government.
Okay, right? That makes sense. That makes sense. So yeah, sounds like for Red Pill, it's too individually focused. There's no collective action. And then, we talked about male hypergamy. There any other pills you wanna throw out there? What's the other one? The religious.
Here's the guy, the red pill too, right? Trying to walk away, you can't, because you can't walk away from society. For example, let's say you, Shah, wanted to say, I'm not going to cohabitate. I know it's dangerous. I'm just going to get my own little apartment.
Sure.
And you find in the last, maybe this year starting, that all the rentals say, we don't want single men.
Okay.
We either want we'll house single women or couples.
Okay.
Now, you can't walk away from that. I mean, you might have one, but let's say it starts catching.
Yeah, I mean, if that happened, then I think there'd be a case to be made for a discrimination there based off of gender. Like in the U.S., I feel like it'd be hard pressed to see that. All they care about is credit, and if you got income coming in to pay the money. You know what I mean? So if that was the case, then it would make it harder to walk away. I mean, to be charitable to you, you can only walk away so much, because to survive, you fundamentally have to participate in the system. I mean, one way or another, you're paying taxes to the system. You have to be part of the economy and do that. So you can only walk away so much. I mean, the question is can enough guys walk away or diminish their contribution to a big enough level to where it takes notice? And I've always felt like
thing about taxes, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned taxes.
Yeah.
They give tax breaks to married couples. So why would you, as a single man, say, why am I paying more money just because I'm single?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I think men have looked at it and said, even with the tax break, it's still not worth the risk. I'd rather just, some of those guys would be like, well, I don't care to make as much money, or they'll, try to find some way of dealing with it, or just pay it. because it's still less risky to them than getting the tax break if they're married. I mean, because I think they do that to help facilitate people getting married and to become good consumers. Then you got the mortgage, and then pretty soon you're just in the system. You're paying, you're buying, you're doing you're being a good consumer because now you have your family. You need a house, a big enough house. You have to participate in the system now. Where a single
Another
guy,
question for you.
yeah,
You're American, right,
yeah.
Shah? Are you American? Okay. When was the last time you had a president who was single? A male president who was single?
I don't even know if we've
Wasn't it?
ever had a male president who was single. I mean, not that I know of. I mean, and not the best with the history of this, but I can't think of one. I mean, I think there's always been a first lady. I
Yeah,
mean,
of course.
listen, if
I think that would work against the man. I don't think they would. I don't think the American people would hire a man who is single.
I think there's a huge stigma against, listen, the older you get, I think they try to make it out like there isn't a stigma, but if you look at a guy, like I get this feeling too. I mean, I'm in my mid 30s and you see people with kids and stuff. I feel like if you're just a guy walking around, people will kind of look at you suspect, like there's this, you're just a single guy. Other families may have a stigma in some ways against you. Maybe they don't want you around. Like maybe they're like, what? Like people are gonna ask, why is this person single? And then they might assume some of the worst reasons, or maybe there's something wrong, or who knows what it is. So when it comes to the presidency of the United States, they would certainly look at that and say this person doesn't believe in family values, or this person has values that don't make sense. Even if it was coming from the left, they would probably sooner have a same-sex couple in there than they would somebody who
Single man,
was,
yeah.
yes, yeah,
A
exactly.
single straight man, exactly.
Because that guy, they probably look at him as too, I don't know, like they maybe think he's volatile, or he just has too much maneuverability. He's not
Just don't
tied
like
down
his
in the
freedom.
system.
They
Yeah.
don't like his freedom. They want him tied down, period.
Yeah. And
It's-
then he
that's it.
can toe the line a lot easier because he's
Here,
in the
matter
system.
of fact, here we were talking about pets earlier.
Mhm.
Another pro male collective, Shield for Men,
Mhm.
one of the best channels out there.
Shield
He
for
actually
men.
showed, yeah, Shield for Men,
Okay.
and he's the one you go to if you want to find any kind of article or data that disproves all the lies told about men.
Mhm.
Event, he had this. He recorded this video where they made an experiment. They would put a child out there, a girl child, a boy child, a cat, and a dog.
Mhm.
And they would set them outside alone and see if people would be concerned about them.
Mhm.
Now, the quickest results was the little girl. If the little girl was walking around by herself, no one around her, people would immediately come out and say, "Are you
Yeah,
by
where's your
yourself?
mommy and
Where's
daddy?
mom and dad?"
Yeah.
After that was the dog.
Okay.
And then after that was the cat.
Okay.
And finally, the boy was dead last. And we're talking about a little boy. But a
Yeah.
little boy hanging by himself, people had zero concern. Matter of fact, they actually started getting the little boy to call for help to see
Mhm.
if someone would come and help him.
Yeah.
So you don't understand. Most guys don't understand just how anti-male our basic psychology is.
Mhm.
Like it's just ingrained, and there's no reason for it. It doesn't help like to propelling human society whatsoever.
And people are, see, when you describe that, and if I think about you trying to explain that to some of these red pillars or black pillars or whatever, or even tradcons, they're gonna say, well, that's because that's biological nature, or God designed us that way. Like what you're looking at is just fundamental human nature. It's supposed to be that way. What would you say to that?
Well, we can go either like even the animal kingdom, for example.
Mhm.
Aging isn't even natural because birds and mammals age, but not reptiles or fish or amphibians. They die eventually,
Mhm.
but their bodies don't become decrepit due to old age in the way that birds and mammals do. So people will say, "Oh, you're aging, that's natural." I said, "Well, it's something that happens to us mammals,
Mhm.
which what human beings are, but it's not necessarily it's not a built-in positivity. It's not a design.
Mhm. So you
That's
would
something
say
that
it's more impacted by cultural beliefs then, or narratives than our biological machinery, so to
and
speak.
here's another thing. There's all kinds of in the animal kingdom that don't follow the same rules. For example, our standard is we think of ourselves like chimpanzees, lions, gorillas. These animals, they do the same old mating practices of the males duke it out, and one guy gets a harem, and everyone else gets blue balls, right?
Yeah, that's
However,
yeah, go on.
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that
Okay.
that's the interesting thing. I mean, there is a lot of emphasis on the Evo psych or biological, nature, biodeterminism of it. But so much of living in a civilization is foregoing immediate based desires in order for better long term outcomes.
Well, the
And
thing is, what I'm trying to say is that other animals don't they don't use that. For example, cheetahs.
mhm,
Cheetahs have been they've been under a pressure, right? What do you call that? Like evolutionary pressure.
mhm,
They are almost extinct. And so the males can't afford to fight each other and have a harem. So if you look at YouTube, even, you will find, and you type in like cheetah brothers sharing a mate, and that's
mhm.
exactly what they do. They show two male cheetahs sharing a female because in order to protect whatever diversity they can,
Mhm.
they know they can't cut out other males. So that pressure has actually changed animal behavior.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to apply this to humans, because on the one end, and again, listen, I think it is maybe because of gynocentrism that unfortunately the little boy is rejected. I'd like to think at least children are seen as vulnerable, whether male or female, the same way. I'm just trying to think, what would they say that would retort against that? So it's regrettable that the son is
Well,
the last
let's put
one.
it this way. You're
Mm,
talking about little boys being looking. I've never seen like the most misogynistic man, like the guys who rant about women.
mhm.
I never hear them say anything bad about little girls, ever. If you get the most ranting guys, so women are evil, they're all demoness or Lilith or whatever.
Yeah.
You never hear them say anything about an 8-year-old girl. They have no problem with them. But grown women will attack little boys and say, little boys,
Oh,
they're
yeah, the
filled with,
misogyny is coming in them earlier. We're seeing
yeah,
toxic behaviors in that, and yeah, and you can even say, I mean, young women are sort of brought up with the same gynocentric leanings, in a way, and you probably could spot those early on, based off how we raise children or what they're encountering in school and in the media and all these kinds of things. Dang it, I had one more oh, yeah, yeah. Another thing that I'm kinda wondering is how do you think it got this bad? Like, how did it get here? You know what I mean? To
oh, it's
where
very simple. Just like you said, the technology,
mm,
as soon as the environment becomes safe enough and it becomes easy enough,
mhm.
then the mask comes off. Women are no different now than they were 1,000 years ago, or even 10,000 years ago. It's just that there was environmental forces keeping a lid on things.
Yeah, see,
And now yeah,
that's
go
one thing
ahead.
that's interesting also because I kinda look at the situation and especially when you think of, like, cost of living, like, if we just took cost of living, it's become a lot more expensive now to, purchase a home than it used to be, and wages haven't really kept up. And, of course, we got AI and stuff around the corner, and part of me wonders, will people be more likely to kind of take a step back, or, will I'm sure behavior patterns will change, but will it change to be more similarly to what it was in the past only because it's now harder to acquire these things? In the 50s or 60s and in the boomer generation, it was easier to do, at least for that small amount of time. Now as it gets tougher, do you think that'll contribute to maybe women willing to work with men a little bit more, um, in that way? I mean, assuming the laws change, men will probably still say no, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Uh, Well, I don't think the girls are going to change their stripes because there's no pressure on them to change.
Mhm.
But I think there is a pressure on men. Like that's why again, my man Eric Sheedler says this generation will be the generation of change because they have an outside pressure
Mhm.
of deselection and abuse that they just cannot get out of. That
And
they're going to have to change.
and
You know, they,
how do men collectively come together and either put the pressure back on them in a way that's, you know, ideally legal? Um, like how do men? And I know your answer is men collectively coming together, um, and probably bargaining for change in some way. But how do we do that and put the pressure back on them in a way that makes this?
again, you see it in South Korea,
Mhm.
right? So South Korea formed a proper MRM that actually was effective, something we've never done over here.
Okay.
And so, I mean, and it's because all those MRAs are young guys.
What did they do exactly? I haven't kept up with South Korea. I just know their fertility rate is in the tubes and people
Yeah.
are watching them.
Well, they were actually, these young guys actually worked online,
Mhm.
kept the tabs on feminists. They would actually do things like, I forget what they threw. It wasn't blood. It wasn't something gross like that, but I don't know, pain or, if they saw a feminist street, they would throw, a drink in their face or
Oh
whatever
my
and
god.
actually fight back in the streets. And they went to I forget what's the politician's name,
Yeah.
but they went to a male politician and they actually collectively said, "We want you to take care of us as men. We want men's issues." And he saw that there was a group that were willing to support him, so he went for it. He
Yeah.
said, "I know it."
Okay. Yeah. See that I mean, not the throwing the drinks and assaulting people, but the going to the politicians and saying, "Hey, we actually have a constituency here that is sizable and that will vote for you." I think has promise to it, and maybe some type of lobbying. I think as the Manosphere, because I see the Manosphere as having these different iterations, and every couple years, it's like it almost has to remake itself, and it becomes a little bit more sophisticated each time.
Oh no,
It-
about the drinks.
yeah.
Look, men have gone to jail for in protest
Mhm.
for generations over other things. But you're drawing a line over feminist. Why?
Well, assaulting others, I wouldn't want to promote that, like any kind of that kind of stuff on, that's something I wouldn't promote. But you know, as
Well,
far as
how do you think the N word was vanquished? Because a white guy would call a black guy the N word, and the
yeah,
black guy would smoke him in the face, and
well,
that's what it took to finally back these guys off.
I think eventually it was the civil rights movement that led to changing of the law. So you had mass protests by people that were out there. They were getting hosed down by the water hose and everything. But that was the nonviolent sort of MLK inspired Gandhi type
Oh,
movement.
okay. So how
Yeah.
about when people thought they didn't want people wearing furs anymore, so they'd throw
Mhm.
blood on people wearing fur.
I can see that, but those people would still rightfully be charged or in some kind of jail time for doing that,
They
right?
so it worked for them. No one
Yeah.
said, "Oh, you can't do that. You
It,
can't do that as
but
a
is that how
protest."
they actually got the first stopped, or was I think it was more so through legal change of making it illegal to actually sell and purchase that. So it wasn't, on there might have been some cultural effect of that, I would say, but more so I would say what actually stopped that more so was legal change. But I don't know, that sounds a little much
Okay.
for
Well,
me.
well, how come? Look, one of the guys has a video. He shows. I, I think it's Spain.
Uh-huh.
The women were talking about femicide, something that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
and they're protesting over femicide.
Mhm.
And the police were there with their shields. And
Mhm.
one of the women had a hammer, and she would hammer at their shields, and she was not arrested. And this isn't throwing a drink in someone's
Yeah.
face.
I
This is using an instrument, and they damaged
yeah.
property. They broke windows.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they definitely should have gotten punished. It's just in that instance, I think probably they didn't want to break up the shields in order to grab this one person because it could have been a
No,
full-on
they
route.
didn't want to touch these women. You say so.
Or if they touched them and did
Men are
that,
going to get
it would look
arrested for
worse
drinking
because
a person's face.
it could have turned back on them and say, oh, like, listen, if you got men's guys, like you got, let's say, PMC guys or whoever it happens to be, and they're out there assaulting women, that's going to give them more ammo to say, look how bad the guys are. Like, it would 100% blow up in the guy's face. The women, on the other hand, they will try to bait that kind of reaction. It's sort of the same thing to get this, sympathy. Like, oh my God, this woman got the ice woman is.
Guys, didn't it? Though it seemed to work for the South Korean guys, though, didn't it?
Is that what they're doing over there? I'll look into it. I'll look into that. We'll see. I mean, if that's the case, maybe it's changing over there. I'll look into South Korea and see.
The point is, these feminist women folded as soon as these guys actually fought back.
In a confrontation on the street, yeah, probably. As far as societal change goes, I don't. We'll see if that's what leads to change in South Korea or not. But yeah, I mean, so okay, interesting.
It's drawing a line. It's drawing a line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Defense is one thing. Offense like that, if someone's sitting there and tossing a drink at them and they're not saying anything or doing anything or encroaching on your personal sovereignty, then that to me would be a overstepping of bounds. So now I think black pillars would agree, and they'll say at a certain breaking point, men are going to lose their minds, and you're going to have a bunch of sexless men out here that probably have a negative effect on society in general. I mean, certainly seems to lead to that kind of stuff.
So these sexless men, them being sexless, that's not negative, but it's negative if they do something about it.
It's certainly negative for them. Yeah, I mean, it's negative. It's a crap situation for them. But if you attack innocent people of the collective, like I think that's all energy that's misdirected. So that's
innocent people. Who's innocent people? What do you mean?
Fellow citizens. Like if you have an Elliot Rodger type person who goes and does a mass shooting to some people in a grocery store, his roommates, or wanton violence.
Oh, you think Elliot Rodgers was black pill?
I think so.
That's what I know of.
I think he was certain. I read Elliot Rodgers' manifesto, all 70 pages of it. That guy he probably wouldn't have called himself black pill, but he was certainly black pilled. I mean, he thought there was no way out. He thought it was all about looks. I mean, he definitely fell into the lookism thing. And he figured his and he even in his manifesto discussed the genetic component to it and said it's because of genes and all that stuff. So I would classify him as black pill for sure. And sexless. But yeah, I could never condone that.
But he shot like 4 guys and only 2 women now.
Yeah.
So he wasn't really much of a misogynist, was he?
Well, whether or not he's a misogynist or not is different, but it was still wanton violence. I think his aim was to get women. It's just his either way, if it was women or men though, wouldn't it still be bad and the wrong thing to do?
Yeah, but why you try to conflate someone throwing a drink in someone's face with shooting them dead?
Well, we went from there to sexless black pillars having a deleterious effect. And then I went there because that's an extreme case to try to highlight why doing that. If somebody throws...
They might act out?
I'm sorry, what's that?
So your concern isn't that these guys are suffering. It's that they might act out.
Yes, I think to resort to violence because of this instead of something that operates within the legal system is certainly the wrong path to take.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah. That is not the solution. I will definitively say that. So throwing a drink in someone's face.
Yeah, but these guys throwing the drink, I mean, they're working as a collective. They're actually saying we are men. Mm-hmm. We are saying we are against feminist. And they throw in the drinks of women they say are feminist. These are enemies.
So okay, give me a scenario of how the drink in the face happens. Who is this woman that they walk up to on the street, minding her own business, that they then throw the drink in the face?
Minding her own business.
Okay, so what's the woman doing? Give me the scenario where this makes sense.
Okay, well, I guess I got to go and look at it. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Why are you trying to paint things as they aren't? Okay.
So you're not advocating for throwing drinks in somebody's face or a woman's face, right?
Why is it so special that they're female?
Because you mentioned that as an example.
Okay, let's see. Things. I might not be able to find it.
Take your time.
I may not be able to find it just because the search results are.
Why don't you just describe it? It's okay. I mean, I don't need to see. You can just tell me what the scenario is.
No, they're not going to give me any information on that.
It's all right. I mean, you can just describe. You can just describe whatever the video is. I don't need to see the footage.
They call it verbal abuse, physical assaults. Really, physical assaults? How? And online harassment. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Online.
But none mention the specific act of throwing a drink. Okay. Okay. They talked about a man assaulting a woman at a convenience store, but that man had a mental issue that they're leaving out, of course.
Well, I mean, the minute, yeah, and see, that's what's going to happen if men do something like that and they explain this as their motivation. I mean, they're going to love that. You know, that's why someone like, you know, it would become the scarecrow for the boogeyman. It's going to play into their boogeyman. See, we were right the whole time. This is what men are at bottom. Women need help. It would set things back.
Oh, again, how come these people who threw blood, not just a drink, blood on people wearing fur? How come they weren't arrested? And
were they not arrested?
As far as I can, I've never.
I mean, I'll have to look into that. But I think, you know, if somebody did that, if you went and did that today to somebody, you would be rightfully arrested, right?
You might be.
Yeah, the cops are going to be like, oh, you see this on camera all the time. Like, you have two protesters yelling at each other. One of them is pro-ICE, one of them's anti-ICE. Just giving an example. And they're yelling at each other, screaming in each other's faces. The minute one of them touches or throws their drink on the other one, the cops that are watching, they're going to come in and arrest the guy who committed the assault, or woman. Doesn't matter. Whoever did it first.
All right.
So, yeah, you know, just to be clear, I couldn't advocate for something like that.
I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but
okay,
I don't mind
that's the important part. Yeah, the important part.
I don't mind it though. Some woman starts abusing a guy in the street and he throws a drink in her face. Hey,
that's self-defense. That's self-defense. If somebody's if they're being assaulted and then they take a course of action to stop that. But if it's just, you know, if it's just wanton, then that's unacceptable.
Yeah, there seems to be a little too much female concern right now. So, in any event, is there anything else you'd like to talk to about?
No, I'd say that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think we've got it covered.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining me and having this discussion today. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, take it easy and shout out to you and the Pro Male Collective.